Hello, my name is David Pittman, and I'm the Director of Research and Development for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and I'm also the Director of the Engineer Research and Development Center. And I'm excited today to introduce the brand new Army Corps of Engineers R&D strategy. It's brand new because we never actually had an R&D strategy before in the history of the Corps that covers our entire spectrum of operations. Our civil works programs, leading the nation's navigation, flood risk reduction, and environmental, and our military mission, and our support for others. So it's a very bold new strategy that deals with all of these issues that the Corps is dealing with for this nation. So this brand new R&D strategy has 10 R&D priorities that we're focusing on. And as I talk through these 10 priorities, you're going to see just how the major issues of the world it's addressing right now. Mitigate and adapt to climate change. The whole world's dealing with climate change right now, so what are we doing to reduce greenhouse gases, to adapting our facilities to deal with sea level rise and storm surge, that sort of thing. We're a key part of the Army. We're part of the Department of Defense. It's a major part of what we do, and we're helping the Army and the Department of Defense come up with new ways of fighting the enemy no matter what they're going to throw at us in the future. We got infrastructure crumbling around us. We got to come up with innovative ways of introducing new technology to address all of those infrastructure issues that we're facing in the Corps and beyond. That's really what our entire civil works program is about, making our communities more resilient to storms, other issues that they're facing as we go forward, environmental issues, etc. So the Army installation strategy focuses on making our installations more resilient, more modern, and more focused on our soldiers and their families, plus acting as force projection platforms for all of our military. We want to help actualize the Army installation strategy. Of course, we do a tremendous amount of R&D with the environment. Tremendous work in our civil works program and our military programs, trying to adapt to the environmental operating principles that we have in the Corps, and how we work with nature in harmony with nature as we deliver our civil works and our military missions. We have an energy issue in the entire country, particularly on our installations right now. We need to reduce our energy demand and make it more green to help combat climate change and simultaneously meet the needs of our warfighter. That's all about using artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data analytics, robotics, all sorts of things that the world's using right now to revolutionize how the world operates. We got to bring that into the Corps of Engineers as well, on how we're helping and supporting the nation and delivering what the nation needs. So we all saw what happened at the Colonial Pipeline when nefarious actors in the world took control of some of our most precious infrastructure that we have on our own land here in the United States within our own borders. We can't have that at our military installations. So not only do we have to protect them physically, we have to protect them from cyber enemies as well, and bring that together on our installation. So we have a special capability in the Army Corps of Engineers in addressing issues in the Arctic, and particularly a special research capability. And so as we protect the Arctic, it's on the leading edge of climate change, and how we defend the Arctic itself. So as you can see, these 10 R&D priorities are very broad-ranging. They're going to require a lot of partnerships and how we get things done and how we deliver this. So in the Corps of Engineers, we'll need our partners in academia, in industry, other government agencies, even internationally, to get this bold new strategy accomplished. I look forward to working with you and partnering with you as we deliver this strategy.
I strongly feel that to achieve this vision, we must execute a comprehensive research and development strategy to meet the challenges of the 21st century. From climate change to warfighting, from overextended infrastructure to cybersecurity, there are no shortage of challenges that will require bold new research and development to solve.
Welcome to ERDC Live. I am your host, Shelley Tingle with the U.S. Army Engineer Research and Development Center. And today we mark a special event. This week is E-Week, and so we are having two ERDC leaders, senior leaders, to discuss what is being called a bold new era of research and development. And so joining me today is the ERDC director, Dr. David Pittman. He is also the director of R&D for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And also joining me virtually is Dr. Joe Corriveau, and he is the director of ERDC's Cold Regions Research and Engineering Laboratory. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good morning, Shelley. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for being here. So I was going to remind the audience, you will see a QR code go across your screen throughout the broadcast. And that's similar to what, if you saw the Super Bowl, similar to that concept, and you will be able to download your copy of the USACE R&D strategy so that you can have it and for yourself. And so you'll have that opportunity to do that. And we'll flash that QR code on the screen throughout the program. I also want to remind our viewers that you are part of this show. And so I'm going to be asking these two gentlemen questions about the USACE R&D strategy, but you have the opportunity to ask them questions as well. And so once we're done, we'll take our audience questions. So we'll go ahead and get started. Dr. Pittman, ERDC has been at the forefront of vital research and development for nearly a century. Why now was it important to develop an overall USACE R&D strategy?
Yeah, well, Shelley, first of all, thank you for hosting this today, and thanks to the audience here at LinkedIn Live. This is a great E-Week topic. It is your week. It's our week.
Right. It's our
we're the Army Corps of Engineers, and we're ERDC, and this is our week. So, in such a timely topic to talk about R&D. We are the ERDC, the Engineer Research and Development Center. So, we're the research labs for the Corps, so we live R&D every day. But my second job is I'm director of ERDC, but I'm also the director of research and development for the Army Corps of Engineers. And so today, I think we're going to talk a little bit about the USACE R&D strategy as you introduced, and it's sitting right there beside you, as you said. And just like on the Super Bowl, you can just do that QR code and get your own copy. So I encourage you to get your own copy. And so this is a product of months of effort. So General Spellman, our Chief of Engineers, when he became chief about a little over a year ago now, about 15 months, he wanted to put R&D at the top of his list in terms of enabling our execution of our massive program we have in the Corps of Engineers. So why now? Well, we've been actually innovating with the Corps of Engineers since 1775, 247 years. We actually helped grow this country. We were some of the first engineers. And ERDC, the research labs, as you said, we're about 100 years old out of the 250. So, but we've never in our history had a comprehensive R&D strategy across all missions of the Army Corps of Engineers. So a little bit about the Corps of Engineers. So we have a military mission. We're the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So the Chief of Engineers is the Chief Engineer for the United States Army. So we have this warfighting and military mission, but we also have this civil works mission. We actually help build the country, our nation's waterways. So even to this day then, we have this huge water resources management mission that we execute. So that dual mission that we have, both military and civil, we've been innovating in that really since the beginning of the country. And in ERDC, for about 100 years, as you said, Shelley. So we finally needed a comprehensive R&D strategy to address what this Corps of Engineers does for this country and addressing some of the nation's toughest challenges through R&D. Hence, a brand new USACE R&D strategy.
So you talked a little bit about how this was no small task.
Right.
And could you give our audience some insight on the process of pulling this comprehensive strategy together?
Well, as you can imagine, it was a tough road. So as soon as he became chief, he says, Dave, so I'm his director of R&D, as I said. So he has 3 directorates. He has a directorate of military programs. He has a directorate of civil works. And he has a director of R&D. That's me. So he says, Dave, I want to make R&D just as elevated as civil works and military programs in our minds, how we operate. So R&D is going to be very important to the Corps of Engineers. let's take it to that level. And the first thing we need is a strategy. I said, okay. So we started working it, and we had meetings and inside of the R&D community and beyond inside of the USACE, because the Corps of Engineers is huge. We're 35,000 people. We're $84 billion program now. ERDC is only about 2,000 of those people, okay, and about 1 or 2 billion of that program. And so this is a USACE R&D strategy. So we had to get USACE involved in this. So we had a series of workshops, pulling people together, not just out of R&D, but across the command. And then we brought in stakeholders, because we do nothing in the Corps of Engineers without partners. We do nothing in ERDC without partners in R&D. So that's other government labs, other government organizations, all the military services, Department of Defense, industry's huge, academia is huge, universities, and then internationally, our allies out there. So we got some world-class challenges to deal with. We got to have world-class solutions. So it's going to take this partnership to pull this off together. So that process took about 12, 15 months. He just signed it off in December. So it's brand new, sitting beside you right now. So we're eager to get it out there and let our partners and stakeholders realize what we're trying to accomplish, because we're going to do this together. So very excited. It's going to take all of us to make it happen.
We have to be pulling in the same direction.
Yes.
So how will this strategy shape ERDC's research environment and the overall mission of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers?
Yes. So the key feature of the USACE R&D strategy is the top 10 R&D priorities. If you want to know what they all are, download the strategy and read them. But for instance, the first one is, these aren't in necessarily any order, but the first one addressed is mitigate and adapt to climate change. Okay, we're all talking about climate change. We understand the impact it's having on this world. So the Corps of Engineers, whether you're military installations, a lot of impacts from climate change there. And of course, if you live out in the United States or in the world, you're dealing with that right now in our communities, whether it's hurricanes, surges, forest fires, droughts. All of that impacts the way we live, and it impacts what we do in the Corps of Engineers. And so we need great technical solutions, great R&D to address these challenges. So ERDC, everything we do inside of ERDC is addressed inside of those top 10 R&D challenges. We didn't necessarily describe it that way. But everything we do inside of ERDC and across the commands, the Corps has, again, 35,000 people. That's in 9 divisions, 42 districts, a bunch of centers and a headquarters in the ERDC. So it's collectively working across the commands, not just the R&D piece, but how we all actually deliver this together to impact how we deliver the program and solve some of the nation's toughest challenges. That's what this strategy is going to get after. And ERDC, of course, as the main R&D piece of the Corps, is going to play a huge role in making that happen.
So that's a great segue for me to ask Dr. Corriveau a question. So Dr. Corriveau, ERDC, and particularly your lab, CREL, has spent decades on the leading edge of climate change research. One of the main priorities that Dr. Pittman just said in the strategy. How is this strategy help align and plan ongoing and future research?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to answer that question with a couple of anecdotal stories, if you will. The Corps of Engineers has known for many decades that to be successful going into the future, they have to have underpinning research and development. So, for example, way back in the 1940s, the Corps of Engineers was building the Alaska-Canadian Highway up in Alaska, and much of it had to be built over permafrost, which is frozen ground. And they ran into a lot of engineering problems, which they figured out how to make it happen. In fact, it was an amazing achievement. In a matter of months, they built a highway that was many hundreds of miles long. But the important thing is the origins of our lab up here in Hanover, New Hampshire, goes back to that challenge in the 1940s with building on permafrost. So permafrost is a major issue today in the realm of climate change, because 25% of the northern hemisphere's terrain is permafrost, and a lot of the permafrost is starting to melt, and that creates tremendous challenges when it comes to having resilient and sustainable infrastructure. But now I want to take you over to Greenland, okay? Over in Greenland, the Air Force has Thule Air Force Base, and we, the ERDC, are very active up at Thule Air Force Base in Greenland in the Arctic, helping them with their infrastructure, much of which is built on unstable permafrost. And so again, this is all related to climate change. And so what we're doing is we're helping them to make sure that their infrastructure is resilient and sustainable, despite the challenges of a changing climate. Probably also worthy of note is historically, about 50 years ago, we were part of the Corps of Engineers team up in Greenland, which started pulling out of the Greenland glaciers these long cylinders of ice cores that were almost a mile deep into the glacier. And when they pulled out these ice cores and they brought them here to Hanover, to New Hampshire, to our lab, they used these ice cores to go in because they have these annual rings, just like a tree has annual rings. And they were able to go back eons into the past and take samples. And from those samples, they could determine temperature and the CO2 percentage in the atmosphere. And they were able to come up with this correlation that as greenhouse gas emissions go up, so does the planet's temperature. So a lot of the very seminal science to understand what we now call climate change was done through the efforts of the Corps of Engineers and its ability to do research and development. So we still have these competencies today, and I want to add, we have climate change competencies not just here in Hanover, New Hampshire, at the Cold Regions Lab. ERDC actually has 7 laboratories, and we have competencies sprinkled across those 7 labs. Thank you.
A lot, Dr. Corriveau, about the power of ERDC and what that means. And so, can you, when you talk about the 7 labs, and it's more than just Krell identifying and the issue of climate change, can you give us an example of how our labs collaborate to bring solutions?
Yeah, sure. We actually formed a climate change tiger team and bring together the goodness of all the 7 laboratories to respond to our customer needs. And as we're doing that, I want to introduce the concept of innovation. Innovation has been a very active activity within the Corps of Engineers as they strive to be more and more innovative. One of the secret ingredients, part of the secret sauce to innovation is diversity. And that diversity of thought and that diversity of approach to solving problems. And so what we're able to do is to, through this effort through our Tiger team, we bring together experts from across the 7 laboratories with very diverse backgrounds, educational backgrounds, et cetera, and people with different scientific and engineering backgrounds. And when you bring all that diversity together, it enables us to have this really innovative powerhouse, if you will, to trying to solve some problems. And so we've been doing that. For example, we have some new projects, for example, in green technology, where we try to crack the code on carbon sequestration, even within building materials. And we're bringing together this diverse team of scientists and engineers to come up with some interesting approaches to trying to crack the code on that. And if and when we do that, think about it, we could have new construction materials that are cheaper, better, and also help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so there's multiple benefits from coming up with these innovative solutions to some of our nation's toughest problems. And I say that, I use that example about green technology because something like 7 to 8% of the greenhouse gas emissions from the world come from making concrete. It's a very energy demanding enterprise. And so we're actually trying to come up with solutions to have green materials for construction, which will reduce on greenhouse gas emissions. And it's good for the nation, it's good for the planet. Thank you.
And that's what we do. We make the world safer and better every day. So, Dr. Pittman, one of the priority areas is titled Secure, Reliable Installation Energy, kind of what Dr. Corriveau just referenced, an area that looks to our military installations and their present and future energy needs. Dr. Pittman, how is ERDC research helping build a more secure and reliable energy infrastructure?
Well, you're right, Shelley. That's one of the top 10 because it's a mission of the Corps to support our military installations. That's why we're doing it. Corps Regents Lab's been doing it since the 40s, stood up as a lab probably in the 50s or 60s. We have another lab in Champaign, Illinois called the Construction Engineering Research Lab. And they were really brought up as we took on the military construction mission for the Army, and now for the Air Force. We actually execute both of those. We needed research labs sort of correlated to University of Illinois. They're really right across the street. They actually leased their property from University of Illinois. And so we have some of the world's best engineers and scientists just on military installation research. And as we know, it's one of the challenges of the world today is energy. We have an energy challenge inside the United States. We have an energy challenge across the world. Just read today's headlines. I mean, we got, energy disruptions and challenges with supplies of oil and carbon intensive type fuel. So we're on this campaign worldwide to reduce, as Joe said, our carbon intensive fuels and try to introduce more green fuels. Okay, so neck that down to installations. Installations are like communities themselves. They're like little cities. They're Army installations, they're Air Force installations, Navy, Marines, et cetera. So how can we secure the energy requirements for those installations? So they have several purposes. They house our families. That's one of the most important priorities right now in the military and the Army is serving our families and protecting our families. They live on the installations. We have a training mission. That's where the war begins. They call it the force projection platforms. There's an Army installation strategy, by the way, just like we have a USACE R&D strategy, and there's now an Army installation strategy that outlines what we have to do with our installations as force projection platforms, training platforms, for our families, give them a great place to live. That's all in the Army installation strategy. And it recognizes, there's also, by the way, an Army climate strategy that just came out. So the Army is really, addressing these at very strategic levels. But all of those point to the need for secure and reliable installation energy. So here are some ways we're getting after it. So in our strategy, we say we want to improve the mission and installation reliability of energy by a factor 10. So improve reliability at factor 10. How are we going to do that? Well, it's going to be a multifaceted approach. It's really all the above. So on the supply side of energy, we're going to have things like new green energy technologies, like Joe talked about. We'll have to have wind, solar, all the typical ones you can think about, geothermal. So we have, the Corps of Engineers, by the way, is one of the largest producers in the United States of hydropower. So it just happens to be a big mission that we have in the Corps as well. But all these technologies we're developing today, we gotta make them cheaper, faster, better, more reliable. And we have that expertise within the Corps of how you do that on installations. But on the demand side, on the supply side as well, you have to have a way to store that, okay? So that energy, the sun's shining, you got power. If the sun's not shining, you don't. So you got to have a way to store that energy very reliably. So there's things called flow batteries. There's battery technology. We're actually introducing some of the largest batteries in the world on our installations, led through our Searle lab in ERDC. So we got to have green development of power, creation of power. We got to have green storage of power, and we got to have secure power, by the way. So we actually have a lab that tests all kinds of ways of testing our control systems. So remember the Colonial Pipeline?
That's
when
right.
The bad actors
That's
took
right.
over our pipelines?
That's
We
right.
cannot have that happening to our military installations. From our energy systems to our internet to computers, energy's a piece of that. So we have actually testing labs at Searle to test these new technologies to keep our energy grid secure. So on the demand side, we also you're going to see increase in energy demands. You see it across the world. From deployed forces, we're doing all these weapon systems now for the Army and the military. They need more energy, not less energy out there. So how are we going to deploy? So we're working on new energy supply, like mobile nuclear power plants, for instance, for deployed forces, for operational energy, we call it. back on our installations and our footprints that we have, how do we reduce the energy demand? We can use better building envelopes, for instance, low carb building materials, like Joe said. We can manage our energy better. Microgrids is a way to do that. So as you make your installations more contained, self-contained, think of a energy grid within a grid. That's a microgrid. So installations can create their own energy, store their own energy, and use their own energy. And what microgrids do is help you do that much more efficiently. You create no more than you need, and you use no more than you create. And so you really balance that energy across the footprint of the installation. So we're actually helping to write that part of the strategy for the Army climate strategy. So there's all sorts of things on the supply side of energy and on the demand side of energy to get after this huge, secure, reliable installation energy problem for the Army and our military installations.
It's pretty incredible when you think about it that ERDC has such a diverse portfolio, research portfolio, in securing reliable energy.
Right.
And
Exactly.
I mean, and so along with decades of cold science.
Right.
And so we're bringing all the right people to the table, and that's so exciting. As a follow-up, how does it work? How does the work we are doing to build more energy resilient and smarter military installations help support more resilient communities? So how are we transferring that knowledge to help build more resilient communities? You know, we live in Mississippi.
Right.
We get hit with hurricanes
Yes.
and tornadoes.
Yes.
And so how do we use that knowledge that we have
Right.
from all the research with our installations and help our local communities?
That's a great question. As I said, our installations are like communities within communities. Usually our military installations are surrounded by other communities, right, that support. A lot of people live out in the regular communities. Not all of our families live on the installations themselves. So they're communities inside of communities. And so as one goes, the other goes a lot of times. They'll get their energy, the water, all the things it takes to actually run the facility from outside the fence wire, so to speak. And so we got to make sure that we got a resilient communities outside the fence, just like we have them inside the fence. So we got to work with our communities from a military perspective, but in another way too, support resilient communities. That's another one of our priorities. That's our entire Civil Works program. That's exactly what it does. So our Civil Works program in the Corps has three major thrusts to it. It's a water resources management function that we have basically for the nation. But it has a navigation mission, so that supports our nation's economy, primarily on our waterways. So that's all our navigable waterways to keep the commerce rolling. I mean, think of our rivers as interstate highways. So just like we have interstate highways, we have airports, we have waterways too that carry a large chunk of our nation's supplies, from that we're selling to other countries and we're bringing in to feed ourselves. And so we're in charge of that from the Corps of Engineers and making sure our nation's waterways, our ports, our coastal ports, and all that are navigable. We also have a flood risk reduction to get to your point. So floods can happen from inland floods, they can happen from coastal floods, hurricanes, and we're seeing a whole lot more of them. Climate change again, right? And so how do we make sure that we can mitigate the risk to our communities from floods and other disasters, fires, and we're seeing all the kinds of things that are happening now. So that's a huge part of what we're trying to do in our Civil Works program. And the third piece is about our environment itself. So we have these things in the Corps of Engineers we call environmental operating principles. And essentially what that says is we got to do all these other missions, but it can't be at the expense of the environment. And so we've got to make sure that we're doing the kind of things and that's exactly the impacts of climate change itself, its impacts on the environment. And so all these things are interrelated, and the Corps has all three of those missions inside of our Civil Works program. So that, in combination with our military mission, you can see the commonalities now. So it's actually a huge advantage we have in the Corps because we do these military things, and there's, usually military, you got to do things, fairly short. You got to deploy now, and it's got to work for a few months and then go away, or installations got to last for decades. That's one set of drivers. And in Civil Works, you might be building dams that have to last decades, even 100 years. More civil engineering kind of thing. And so you combine those two drivers there with all the disciplines that Joe just talked about to achieve these solutions with our partners and others out there. So you can see it's a very, very rich way to make this country and our military more resilient.
It goes back to what Dr. Corriveau was saying about bringing innovation to the table.
Yes.
And that's part of what we're doing. So, Dr. Corriveau, many ERDC laboratories are working together to preserve and modernize our nation's infrastructure. How big is the need to extend service lives and build stronger infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think I want to tether the answer to climate change, because as the climate's changing, we're presented with many challenges with regard to the sustainability and resilience of our infrastructure. So I think the goal is to be smart about our approach to infrastructure, and of course, we know this is a very key topic for our nation because we just had the infrastructure bill passed not too many weeks ago. So this is a huge government-wide challenge, and we're going to get after that. And what we have to do is we have to think about infrastructure that's going to be cheaper to build and yet better and more resistant to the impact of climate change. And we have to think about using green technology. So as we go into the future, this is a little visionary. I believe we're going to be much more mindful about our approach to how we build our infrastructure. And we're going to want to use building materials that are going to be more resilient on all those different levels, and that they might actually be cheaper to use. They might be easier to use, and they might help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And in the long run, we will end up with infrastructure which is more energy efficient and more resilient as we face these various challenges as a nation, in particular the challenges of climate change. So do you have a follow-up question to that?
I do. So when we just had the new infrastructure bill passed, and we know that it's a problem, but we also know we can't build our way out of this, that we have generational problems when it comes to our infrastructure. And so how do you see ERDC's role in modernizing this infrastructure? How does R&D play into what exactly you're talking about with better materials, greener materials?
Exactly. That's going to come from research and development, because I don't think we have all of the solutions yet to what we need to do as a nation when it comes to our resilient and sustainable infrastructure for the future. In other words, many of the solutions aren't just off the shelf or just the adaptation of a current technology to a new application. We actually have some work to do. For example, we talked earlier about green technology. Clearly, there's a lot of work to do there. I think we're going to be in a really good place in a few years from now. And I'll even introduce the concept of 3D printing. I think as we go into the future, we talk about engineering in a bag, if you will. We're gonna be able to go to remote locations and build infrastructure using this new 3D printing technology, and I think it's going to give us opportunities to build infrastructure like we never did before. For example, if you think about NASA wants to put a human habitat on Mars, they're not going to bring all that construction material with them. They're going to bring a 3D printer, and they're going to print infrastructure using what they find on Mars. And so we're actually already working with NASA on that tremendous adventurous challenge. So yeah, I think going into the yes, yeah.
Future R&D coming up. And so, Dr. Pittman, throughout our history, ERDC has helped protect and project our nation's armed forces. And you, as former director of the Geotechnical Structures Lab, this is kind of your background. How are we advancing our R&D to help win future wars?
Well, that's a great question, Shelley. And actually, it's the second on the list, not number 2 priority. But it's called Win Future Wars, exactly. So that actually happens to be a majority of what ERDC's portfolio is focused on the military and winning future wars. So for instance, we happen to be a key part of Army Future Command, and the DASA RT, that's the Army staff element that runs the whole Army S&T program to actually address the Army modernization priorities. There's an Army modernization strategy, okay? So we need to build a new long-range precision fire, a new artillery. We need to build next-generation combat vehicle, new tanks and robotic ground vehicle systems. We need to build new air missile defense systems, new network, et cetera. There's 6 modernization priorities, and there's 8 cross-functional teams that support them. We're actually supporting 7 of the 8 cross-functional teams and all 6 of the modernization priorities with our Army S&T work in all of our laboratories. So specifically, and by the way, our laboratories, we've mentioned a couple, so far about 3. So our Cold Regions Laboratory, Joe explained that very well. I talked about our Construction Engineering Research Lab in Champaign, Illinois. We actually have the world's best geospatial research laboratory, co-located with the Army Geospatial Center in Alexandria, Virginia. And then we have here in Vicksburg, where I'm sitting now, is our headquarters. It's called the Waterways Experiment Station. That's what began about 100 years ago, tackling some of the nation's toughest challenges with floods, for instance, that flood risk reduction mission I talked about after the 1927 flood. But in Vicksburg, we have the Geotechnical Structures Lab. I was the director there and sort of grew up in that lab. We have an environmental laboratory. We talk a lot about environment. Some of the world's best environmental engineers and scientists work here at ERDC. We have Coastal and Hydraulics Lab, the original lab of ERDC. Again, that Waterways Experiment Station, looking at coastal and hydraulic inland flooding issues, for instance, and all the modeling and simulation associated with that. And then right now we're sitting in our Information Technology Laboratory. We have some of the world's best engineers and scientists focused on computing technology, information technology. We actually run the Department of Defense's High Performance Computing Modernization Program. That's all the supercomputers in the Department of Defense. We run that program here, and we actually house one of their supercomputing centers right here in this building that we're sitting in right now. So you look at all of those expertise coming together on how, and every one of those support winning future wars. But you asked specifically about projection and protection. So we got to project the force, okay? So we talked about our installations. We don't fight the war in our installations, hopefully. We're going to be fighting those wars overseas. So you're going to project by air or by sea. So for air, you got to have airfields. So we have the world's best airfields and pavements group right here in ERDC, supporting both the Army and the Air Force and the Marines, by the way, and Navy as well, on how we project those airfields and pavements, for instance. But we have ports as well. So we have our Coastal Hydraulics Lab, experts on logistics over the shore operations. What are the waves going to do? What are the rivers going to do? What are the wave conditions we're actually going to be in? We also have, by the way, as part of our Coastal and Hydraulics Lab, a field research facility at Duck, North Carolina. We have a permafrost tunnel, by the way, as part of the Coal Research Lab in Alaska. But we have all these great experimental facilities. So this field research facility in Duck, North Carolina, it's actually measuring continuously waves since 1975, something like the mid-70s. So it's the longest continuous measurement of waves in the world. So we understand then how to project the force airfields and pavements. We understand port operations, how to do the coastal part of that, and then repairing the port facilities very, very quickly, assessing and repairing them. So there's assessment methodologies, there's repair materials. And then when you actually get there, you have to traverse across the land. So you have to have mobility. So we have some of the world's best mobility experts for ground vehicles across any terrain you can imagine. We have we call them gap crossings in the military. They're rivers. They're things that you can't cross easily with a ground vehicle. So we come up with technologies for assessing those gaps and then mitigating, we call them, crossing the gaps. You got to get across there somehow. They might have water in them. That's a problem. That's where your hydraulics lab comes in. And so that's projecting the force. And then protecting the force, usually they're shooting at us, okay? So the enemy doesn't give us the best place in the world to land, or they're always going to be shooting at us. And so how do we protect our force against what they're going to shoot at us? And so we have the world's best experts on blast and weapons effects. So if it's a blast, if they're shooting at us with a mortar, a rocket, a nuclear weapon, an IED, anything that's going to blow up and try to hurt somebody or hurt our equipment, we know how to protect it. We've been doing that since World War II. So we come up with rapid technology. Sometimes it's built infrastructure. We can actually build it, and we actually help build a lot of infrastructure around the nation to protect it from the enemies, shooting us. But even when we deploy it, we develop rapid systems that protect our troops and our platforms and systems out there. And we're doing this to this day to help protect our force. So we work with others, by the way, on things like energy blast and that sort of energy weapons, energetic weapons, and that sort of thing. So just to give you a short story, we were attacked in CENTCOM about 2 years ago in Syria. We had a base in Syria, and the bad guys shot at us, Iraq, put some ballistic weapons out there. They're very huge blast. And none of our soldiers were killed. Thank goodness our protective systems actually worked. But there was some traumatic brain injury. The shock waves themselves were not good. So the CENTCOM commander called through our transatlantic division to us and said, hey, can we come up with a rapid way to protect our soldiers next time that this happens? And so we work with the medics. There's a medical research lab as well, this sister laboratory in the Army, to come up with a rapid, employable solution to modify those bunkers that we had in place so that we could protect our soldiers if that ever happened again. And that right now is getting employed in theater. So we don't just do the S&T part of it. We actually do what we call operational R&D. We're operationalizing all these concepts and putting them into practice. And frankly, that's what we're trying to do back to the R&D strategy itself again. So we can come up with all the best ideas in the world, like research labs do, but if they're not used by somebody to do something faster, cheaper, and better, as Joe just said, then why do we do it? So part of the strategy then is we're calling it operational R&D, is to get those practices into place so that we actually are delivering the program. We're fighting the wars, we're building infrastructure, we're doing all these things, addressing climate change much more effectively than ever before. That's what we're trying to accomplish with this strategy.
And so at this time, I'm going to remind our audience to be submitting questions to our LinkedIn page to ask Dr. Pittman and Dr. Corriveau. And so right now, I'm going to go to our first question, and it says, as director of ERDC, how crucial is this collaboration to our success and pushing the envelope in R&D innovation?
Well, it's absolutely critical. It's been critical since day one. Okay, and I'll just say of ERDC, since 100 years, 1929, not quite 100 years ago, we've had partners from the very get-go. So not only inside the Corps of Engineers, our research laboratories, and our districts and divisions that have to employ a lot of these technologies, and our partners outside of the Corps in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. We work a lot with the Department of Homeland Security. We work with almost every government agency out there, NOAA, EPA, and others who have any sort of engineering or science-based operation, for instance, Bureau of Reclamation, Department of State. So we have to work collectively with our partners in industry, academia, other government agencies, and internationally. We have a lot of international support out there as well with our allies, because these are world-class challenges, and we've been doing it since day one. So when we're very, very successful, R&D is kind of one of those things you can fail, right? Because if you're not pushing the envelope, you're going to fail some if you're really pushing the envelope on things. You've got to try things and see if they work, but we've got to get them employed. The bottom line is we're going to win future wars. We're not going to tie future wars. We're going to win future wars. And so we just cannot do that alone. We can't do it alone in the Corps of Engineers, much less ERDC. And so our partners need us. We need our partners. That's across government, private sector, and academia and allies. And we've been doing it as a way of operating since day one.
So our next question is for Dr. Corriveau. The Army has recently released their strategy regaining Arctic dominance. How does this align with the USACE R&D strategy?
Oh, it's in complete alignment. What's interesting about this is I'm going to link it to climate change, because the part of the planet that's been changing the fastest because of a changing climate is the Arctic, and it's generated a bit of a competition with Russia and China in the Arctic. And so the Arctic is a very strategic part of our planet, and the Army, Navy, the Air Force recognize that. And so yes, the Army recently came out with their Arctic strategy, and the Army's Arctic strategy is tethered to the Army's climate strategy. And so I want to kind of build upon some comments Dr. Pittman just said about working with others. So last week was the Army's first ever Arctic War Game, which kind of was an exercise to look at what the possibilities are with a potential conflict in the Arctic. And so it was an amazing opportunity for the ERDC and USACE to be part of this Army war game. And I'll tell you that the Corps of Engineers is going to have a huge role to play in the Arctic. But the important part of this is that in going forward, we the Army have made so much. We've advanced so far with our strategy and our war gaming that the Navy wants to get in on the action along with the Air Force, and of course we want that because it's going to be to defend the Arctic will be a multi-domain operation that will include them. But meanwhile, we're also going to start to pull in some of our Arctic partner nations, right? And so as we go forward, coming up with the Army's Arctic strategy, we're going to be working with the Army, Navy, Air Force, with our foreign partners, because it's going to be a real team effort to get to where we need to be to regain Arctic dominance, just like the title of the strategy proclaims. And what's an interesting part of this is Dr. Pittman was talking about our power projection around the world. You understand, we're talking about the homeland. Alaska is part of the homeland, so we're talking about power projection in a part of the planet to protect our homeland. So it's really exciting to be all part of that. And it's also doubly exciting because we're going to play such a key role in helping the Navy and the DoD and the nation to come up with a solution for the future.
And that's one of the reasons we titled today's LinkedIn Live "A Bold New Era of R&D."
Yes,
if Arctic War Games is not part of that, I don't know what is. And so our next question is, I believe, for Dr. Pittman. It says, Dr. Pittman, what does the strategy address? Does the strategy address current environmental issues the nation is facing?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So it actually, that's one of the top 10 priorities, by the way, is all about environmental sustainability and resilience. So please download a copy of the R&D strategy. I think you're really going to like it. By the way, back to Joe's comments about the climate strategy and the Arctic and the number 10, it's not 10 in priority, it's the number 10 priority. It's just number 10 is protect and defend the Arctic. So we understand that critical thing. The Army has an Arctic strategy now. It's literally a piece of the top 10 priorities for the Corps of Engineers. So all these are linked, just like Joe said. Joe actually led our climate change strategy. He's leading our protect and defend the Arctic strategy as well as part of the Corps strategy. But the environment, it's all about the environment. As a matter of fact, I can describe everything that we do in the ERDC from our R&D approach in terms of the environment. Really, it's what we live in today. So the way I talk about everything we do, whether it's co-regions or whether it's warfighting or whether it's, I say we try to understand the operational environment. So it's all about having sensors. It's situational awareness. Battlefield commanders want to understand the whole battlefield when they go out there and fight every day. If you have that advantage, it's ancient warfighting capabilities. You need to understand the environment and the terrain better than the enemy does all the time. That's an incredible amount of research in sensors, and we have multi-sensing capability, geospatial, and all that sort of thing. But even our rivers, even our snow melts and ice packs, and what's the drought conditions, and that's just understanding everything up until now. So we got to work with NASA and NOAA and USGS to do all that. But that's understanding the environment, okay? Then predicting, right, the operational environment is like, what's going to happen? We have some of the world's best modelers inside of the ERDC, inside the Corps of Engineers. We understand as good as anybody else in the world what's going to happen with our coastlines, what's going to happen with hurricanes, what's going to happen with floods, what's going to happen with the water, what's going to happen with droughts. We actually developed the defense climate action tools, for instance, to understanding the impacts of climate change on our installations and the Army. Actually, right here in the Corps of Engineers, Dr. Kate White, came right out of a co-regents lab, is actually helping the Department of Defense right now shape the entire Department of Defense climate action plans. So that's predicting what's going to happen. We have some of the best people in the world that do that, both numerical and with empirical models. And then the third piece is shaping the operational environment. So what kind of new infrastructure do we need to build? What kind of tactics and techniques and procedures do we need to develop? So everything we do, it involves the environment in some way. We live in the environment. It just so happens we have a particular expertise on the environment itself to understand, predict, and then shape activities so we can accomplish the mission that we have to do, whether it's military or civil in the Corps of Engineers, or and with our environmental operating principles, not impact the environment adversely in the process. We got to live in this world, so R&D is going to support that.
And so, speaking of environmental, we have a question from Dr. Chris Griggs. He has asked, in terms of modernizing infrastructure and environmental sustainability and resilient installations, water seems to bridge the gap from military to civil works. How can we leverage our research in water to address both business lines?
That's perfect, Chris. You know the answer. So water was actually our beginning, the Waterways Experiment Station. It was really studying floods and that sort of thing on the Mississippi River, the Great Flood of 27. So understanding water from a flood and physical property standpoint, flooding, coastal effects, and that sort of thing, huge mission that we have. If all we did was study that would keep us busy for the next 100 years. Okay, we got a huge amount of research there in both civil and military, as Chris said. But we also we actually supply water. We got to have water security on our military installations. This is a connection actually that Chris has. And so how can we actually work these right now in concert with the environmental lab in Vicksburg and our Champaign lab, our construction engineering research lab, coming up with operational water, you could call it, coming up with ways of providing water, to our projected forces in the military and making sure they have the water they need, because you got to have water to live and you got to have water to operate. So they come up with hybrid systems as they can take wastewater, for instance, that they use to clean and then treat it so you can use it for more cleaning or even make it potable to drink later. So we use water conservation principles that we use for the civilian side and apply it to the military side. And Chris Griggs' projects, he actually works on nanomaterials that can actually use through osmosis, actually clean water without a minimal amount of energy, back to the energy problem again, that we don't have a lot of in the theater, and make sure that we can maintain water security in an operational environment as well. So those are two small examples of how water impacts us from a civil work standpoint and everyday life standpoint, all the way over to the military side as well.
And it crosses some of the priorities. It's part of modernized infrastructure. It's also part of it's also part of energy and resilient communities. We have to have water along with our installations. So it covers a lot of our priorities. All right. So we have a question from Mark. How does ERDC fit into mitigating environmental and safety impacts of decommissioned legacy navigation projects, such as the Pearl River Navigation Project? So let me repeat that again. How does ERDC fit into mitigating environmental and safety impacts of decommissioned legacy navigation projects?
I'll have to take a pass on that. I don't know that specific project, honestly. I'll bet we are involved, though, if it has anything to do with the Vicksburg district, the Mobile district, or the New Orleans district. I'm not sure which of our districts would be involved in that, but that's where they pull us in. That's what we call an operational R&D. So we have a lot of experts here inside of ERDC on environmental, coastal resilience issues. And if there's a big, deep technical question that's not typically done out in the engineering world, they'll pull us in to help solve that. But I have to admit, I don't know the answer to that specific question. So I apologize.
And just so you know, when we don't know the answer, we will post the answers on this, on LinkedIn. And if we don't get to one of your questions, you can always email erdcinfo@usace.army.mil.
I guarantee you somebody in ERDC knows the answer.
We know someone that knows the answer. So this one's for Dr. Corriveau. Jason asks, do many of these strategies significantly change the direction of research ERDC was already doing?
Yeah, obviously these are these are strategic drivers, and one of the really the joys of working for an organization with engineers and scientists like the ERDC is you have to be flexible and adaptable. And so as there are emergent needs in the nation, emergent scientific or engineering needs, we shift gears to go after those national needs, those defense needs, those civil work needs, et cetera. So yeah, so we're very adaptable, and what we do, if necessary, we will build new core competencies in order to serve our nation. So again, in short, we're very adaptable, and we will go after those challenging engineering problems that are presented to us. And in fact, it encourages the scientists and engineers. They love a new challenge. Thank you for the question.
All right, so this one is for Dr. Pittman, and it says, Tim would like to know, yesterday the Department of Homeland Security warned Americans of potential cyber attacks. How does the USACE R&D strategy address those challenges?
Great tip, Tim. That's one of the top priorities, R&D priorities. Again, download that strategy. But priority number, I can't remember, I think it's number 8, is cyber and physical security. So enabling cyber and physical security. And let me tell you what that means. So physical security is obviously somebody trying to attack us with a weapon or a car, or Department of Homeland Security, for instance. They're worried about car bombs and, mass crowd events like Super Bowl or large events like that. Think about 9/11. They attacked us with airplanes, okay? So it can be conventional weapons or some other kind of a terrorist attack. That's a physical security issue, and we do a lot of work with the Department of Homeland Security, including the military services, in solving those particular problems. Cyber attacks have become extremely, prolific, unfortunately, over the last 10 years. Ever since we've had our internet, we've had cyber attacks, really. And so they can be attacking our computers and networks. They can be attacking our energy. They can attack our water. Anything that's connected to the internet, operational technology, for instance, our dams. Just think of this. We got our dams, our waterways, all controlled, some of those controlled remotely. So we don't need some nefarious actor out there to start controlling our dams, our installations, just like they did with the Colonial Pipeline. So that's cybersecurity, okay? So the Corps of Engineers got the mission to bring that together, physical security and cybersecurity. We already had tons of expertise in both, by the way. So I'm sitting right now, again, in the Information Technology Lab, and they run a network for the Department of Defense. It's called the Defense Research Engineering Network. It ties all the supercomputers together in the DoD that work on these types of problems, okay? So that network is getting attacked thousands of times a day. So there's a cybersecurity operational group that actually protects that network every second of every day, 365, okay? So, but they're also doing research in that area. They're always wanting to be, you got to be smarter than the bad guy. And so they're doing R&D to protect us against cyber attacks, not just protecting us against cyber attacks, doing research to help us do that better in the future. So when I say we have world-class research in both physical and cybersecurity, I mean it, okay? And so what we got to do is pull that together, particularly for our military installations. But obviously, as somebody said earlier, whatever we do in these military communities, installations, it's also going to be applicable across the line in our overall communities. And that's where we're working with, like Department of Homeland Security and others, to make sure that whatever technology, wherever we learn it, we're trying to apply it to wherever the problem is. That's the beauty of what we can do in the Corps of Engineers. A lot of times we're the integrators. We're the ones that pulls that together across communities to make sure that these challenges are addressed no matter where they come from.
And that's amazing. So we're about to wrap up. Dr. Corriveau and Dr. Pittman, do y'all have any closing remarks?
Joe, go first. Thank you. I thank you for inviting me to this forum. It brings me actual joy to have discussions like this. It's wonderful to be part of an organization that values innovation and tackling some of our nation's greatest scientific and engineering challenges. And Happy to be here and happy to be part of the team. And thank you very much again for inviting me. It's been a genuine pleasure. Dr.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for doing this with me. It's a great partnership here. And thank you, Shelley, for actually hosting this for us. And I just want to say here on Engineer Week, bringing it back to Engineer Week, this is the one week of the year we get to celebrate our great engineers and scientists, across the world. Of course, the Corps of Engineers were some of the, founding engineers in this country, actually. And then the ERDC itself, the research laboratory. So I just want to thank all the engineers out there and scientists. And because we work in the Corps of Engineers, we have technicians, we have administrators, we have scientists, engineers, all doing this engineering. So we're all engineers today and doing this great service for this nation. I'm so excited that we have this bold new R&D strategy to tackle some of the nation's toughest challenges, and that the ERDC itself, as you said, Shelley, we discover, develop, and deliver new ways to make the world safer and better every day. It's never been a better time to be an engineer. It's never been a better time to be part of the Army Corps of Engineers. And with our partners, with you, please download that strategy. You'll see where you fit in. If you don't, call me. I can talk you through it. But hopefully you're excited as well as we tackle these challenges together with our partners in solving some of the nation's toughest challenges. So thank you, Shelley.
Thank you. And thank you both for joining me today during eWeek and discussing our new strategy. I also want to remind our LinkedIn audience, first of all, thank you for joining us. And remember that if you have any questions that we did not address, you can always email us at erdcinfo@usace.army.mil. And if you want to listen to a fabulous podcast on some of our upcoming R&D products that are fascinating and aligned with these priorities, you can go to the poweroferdicpodcast.org. Thank you so much.